Hey everybody, welcome back to the Team Church Podcast with Kevin Gerald. My name is Brandon Stewart. I'll be your host today. We're excited to have another conversation today that every team needs to be having, especially in this season. And our goal, the reason we created this space, is to set up the conversation so that you can take it to your team and finish the conversation. So welcome to this space. So glad you're here. And today we have a really vital and necessary conversation for you. Pastor Kevin sat down recently with Pastor Micah Pelkey, the lead pastor of Storyside Church in Belleville, Ohio, for a conversation on being a team player. This is actually a conversation that Pastor Micah had both with our team here at my home church at Champion Center, as well as at our Team Church Conference. And if you were in either of those rooms, you know that this conversation is vital and necessary for this day and hour that we're leading in. So we're going to head to the interview already in progress. I believe this is going to help you grab something to write with, take notes with, share this with your team. Let's hear from Pastor Micah Pelkey today on being a team player. All right, everybody, I'm here with Coach K, Pastor Kevin. It's so good to be back for another episode today.
Hello, everyone. So excited about this this opportunity today.
Absolutely. And we have a friend with us today. Why don't you...
Pastor Micah Pelkey. He is the pastor of Storyside Church in Belleville, Ohio.
That's right.
And he has 4 amazing children, 3 locations, 1 beautiful, amazing wife, and is a great friend of ours and part of our Team Church tribe. And so I ask you, Micah, to talk about this because you taught this topic at a team meeting for us. And I said, we got to have that on a podcast. So welcome today. So glad you're here.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, today we're going to have a conversation on being a team player, and I'm really excited to hear your thoughts on this. It really did help our own team here locally. And this is the Team Church podcast, and we serve the greater Team Church tribe, the greater capital C, big C church. PK, I actually wanted to throw this question to you. You know, we haven't talked about this for a minute. Where did the name Team Church even come from? Because we kind of put team as our main objective and our main goal. We're going to talk about being a team player. Why have you leaned into that so much over the years?
It's probably been 25 years since I just wanted my own church to understand some of the dynamics and to follow some of the dynamics of a team. And I realized that one of the first things Jesus did when he started his ministry was that he went after a team. He recruited a team. He brought them together. He basically, you look at Matthew chapter 10, even with the 70, I mean, he had these layers of what I would call team. And he gives them specific, clear directions having to do with how they're supposed to approach what they're going to do, and the mindset that they're doing it with, and the do's and the don'ts. And so to me, that kind of gives me the framework or the flashback to the days when I was so involved in sports. And there's been an affinity for me with being on a team, to the point where, and some of you guys would understand this, Micah, you probably understand this, when I was no longer on a team, I was on teams all my life, I really missed it. There's something about being on a team. Yep. So I just said, well, hey, I'm on a team.
That's right.
It's called Team Church. And so that was years ago. And at that point, I honestly don't know that there was a lot of rallies called team rallies or anything like that. And I wondered, is this going to be corny? Is this going to be received? Is this going to cause people to think I'm being too secular, mixing it in with something spiritual? I had all of those thoughts originally, but here we are. All these years later, and this is Team Church.
I think it's brilliant, and it's given us some great language over the years. And Pastor Micah, I feel like that's exactly what you did with this teaching, is you gave us some great language on being a team player. I'm just going to set you loose for a second to talk to us about a team, a player, a team player.
Yeah, so I love sports. Really since my childhood growing up in Canada. Of course, hockey. My dad wanted me to be a tennis player, sent me to tennis lessons for years. I was in some tournaments, but hockey was my affinity. And then growing baseball, football, really all of the above. But I'm drawn to the importance of team and teamwork, team unity. And so some of these thoughts on being a team player, I was sitting by myself one day, and I do some chaplaincy work. I've done some for the NHL, some for the NFL, and some college and high school stuff. But I just started jotting down some thoughts on there are teams and there are players, but there's not a lot of team players.
Wow.
And how that applies, my kids, they play sports. My two young guys, some travel ball. My daughter Eliana just won the championship of her softball. And it is so important when you start looking at team players. And so team by definition is a number of persons associated together in a work or activity. A player is one that plays. And you have those dynamics, and sometimes people think just because they're on a team, they're a team player. It's not true.
Not true.
There's some characteristics that are really, really important to be a team player.
I feel like we come to ministry thinking about how I'm going to be a great player,
Right?
And we come by my opportunity, my gifting, my talent. But I think one of the things we try to elevate at Team Church is actually some of that is secondary to the bigger thing you're a part of.
Yeah. Yeah, when you look at some team player principles, I've always been drawn, like I said, to sports. I follow on social media, books I read. I will read a lot on executives, coaches, what was the keys to coaching, and I think the collaboration of coaches, of players, the importance of that. There's so much to learn. One thing, Coach K. We call you Coach K with Pastor Kevin, but Coach K, the basketball coach, he has said for years he doesn't set rules. He sets standards. And I think that's so brilliant because his thing is if we just set rules, we're minimizing the team. Set standards.
Yep.
This is the culture. This is the standard of our team. And watch those people, those players elevate to the standards of the team. And I think it applies in ministry, in church, in business. I think the same thing. I think there's standards.
It's beautiful. So walk us through just in this season where you're at. What do you see as kind of being the bullseye here for team players? Like what is that looking like in your mind right now?
Well, I think even with everything we have going on, the last 18 months maybe, but even in general, one of the first things that would stand out to me is just being committed to the process. When you look at sports, any sport. But you could have someone in baseball, for example, single A, double A, triple A, and then you get to the majors, but you're committed to the process. I recently heard Tom Brady, the quarterback for the Buccaneers. They just won a championship, but he traced all the way back to his freshman year, and he was on a team that went 0-8, and he wasn't even the starter. He couldn't even win the starting job on an 0-8 freshman team. He was the backup quarterback, but he talked about how he committed to the process, and he was going to keep getting better. And I think sometimes, in life, you can have people that say, I want to win a championship. I want to, start, this, launch this. I want to succeed here. But they're not committed to the process.
Wow.
And, I think some of the greatest, not just Tom Brady, but all of us, I think some of the people that are able to see success in ministry and in life, they're committed to the process and they're willing to wait it out and work it out.
It's funny that you say that because I was just showing my grandson and we were repeating it over and over on YouTube. There's a Tom Brady YouTube where he's throwing the ball in training camp. I think right now, basically it's current. He throws the ball into this what I would say is a baseball pitching machine, but I guess they have a football one as well. But it's these wheels that turn and rotate, and he throws it into that little narrow spot. The football won't even fit through it. That's how small it is. And if you hit it just right on the point, it'll throw the ball back at you. So you're talking, he's doing it from like 20 yards, 25, and then he backs up. And he's smiling in the camera, and he does it again. Boom! And so he's putting the spiral right in that little hole, and then boom! It pops it back at him. So, but when you're talking about committing to the process, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about somebody who couldn't even start for a team that was
Freshman
0-8.
team 0-8, yeah.
And now can do that repeatedly as a quarterback. So.
I had breakfast, not to talk Tom Brady too much maybe, but I had breakfast with a professional athlete just a couple weeks ago, and it was so interesting. He was sharing with me that 1 week after the Buccaneers won the championship, Tom Brady was already starting a practicing regiment. And that just was mind-blowing to me at his age, with his success, all of these championships, and he's already back at it. How can I improve? How can I get better? But whether it's a freshman or now even at his age, you're committed to the process, and it's important.
And on a team, I would just say to individuals that are listening today, the application is that I always try to remind our staff and our team is that you may look really good in our setting.
Right.
Like you may get to the point, but just remember, it's like a fishbowl. Like there are people out there who do 10 times what you do. Yeah. They do it, in more strength than you're doing it. So don't get to the point where you just relax. Keep building your competence.
That's so good.
I mean, obviously really you're on our team because we believe in you and we want you here. But this commitment to the process, a lot of times people are they're assuming, well, there's nowhere for me to go from here, or there's no promotion, or there's nobody, or how come I didn't? And they don't realize that maybe they haven't improved, they haven't stayed committed, maybe they haven't gotten better, and that's on you. And that's what we're saying is when people are hungry, committed to a process, it shows up in their work.
Yeah, and I think it's so important too, even when you look at just the history in sports of players that a lot of times, even like a Tom Brady, drafted late, you're backing up Drew Bledsoe.
Yep.
Drew Bledsoe gets injured. That's the only reason Tom Brady got a chance.
Exactly.
But if you're not preparing, if you're not ready, sometimes people are like, I'm waiting for an opportunity. I think you commit to the process all the way back, early stages, early ages, and you continue to work at it through that process.
Yeah. So if we're talking team here, talk to us about your second principle, which was being committed to the vision, because we're all a part of something a whole lot bigger than us individually.
Correct. Yeah, I think when we're committed to the vision, I recently got some progressive glasses, and I'm all by myself. I put the glass. I don't like them. I have 2 pairs of them, and trying to get used to, even when the doctor was telling me, Micah, it's going to take some time, learn not just moving your eyes, but, it's a whole body movement thing. And then the up and down, I would find myself getting dizzy. I would look down to see something, and then I would look up and my head would be swimming a little bit. And, one day I was just thinking about even something so simple as my glasses, how it's important to learn to see right now, like what's happening right now in your church, on your team, on your staff.
Yep.
But then understanding that I could also look up and see out. So I'm not able to see far away. And sometimes I think we have people on teams that see right now what's in front of them. But if you ask them to see a week out, a month out, a year out, they can't see it.
Right.
But then there's some people that all they do is see what's further out, and they can't see what's needed today. I think if you are a healthy team player, you learn to balance those two. I can give us this day, this moment right now. I can see what's in front of me, but then I can also ask God to help me to be able to see further out. And not everyone on a team's able to do that.
Excellent.
They're not always able to balance those two.
That's good. Well, I think anytime you get people to pull up, and those two go together, I guess is what I'm seeing. They pull up from where they are right now, and they think, for my team to get better, I got to get better.
Right.
And to have a vision that sees not only the present and, hey, I'm doing good, I'm holding my own, but realizing for our team to actually get better, I have to get better. Team members have to get better, and that's about being a team player.
And I know one thing, Pastor Kevin, you've helped me a lot with this. Even now, I'm still asking, how would you handle this? How would you do this? And it could be communicating, leading, staffing, any of those things. I'm not sure we ever get past being coachable and teachable. I was reading recently, and I thought this was so awesome, where they were sharing that years back, was with Coach Dean Smith, but he asked Michael Jordan, what is your greatest skill set? This was years back. He asked Michael Jordan. So he was looking at the giftings, talents he would bring. He said, what's your greatest skill set? He said, Michael Jordan told him, my greatest skill set is I'm coachable. And
good.
I loved that.
Yep.
Because when you're thinking, is it the no-look pass? Is it the shot? Can you drive right hand, left hand? And it's not any of those answers.
Wow.
He said, I just want you to know, Coach Smith, I'm coachable. And Coach Smith went on to say that Michael Jordan was a sponge. Anything he would share with him, Michael wanted to learn. And I think we, even in ministry with our callings, church teams, I think just to adopt and adapt that into our own lives. What's your greatest skill set?
Right.
That I'm coachable.
That's so good.
Teachable.
And I would just say one thing I realized, this may help somebody out there today. One thing I realized is that if you react in a moment where someone is coaching you, like if you react with, I got it, or I know, or you walk away and you go, why did they say that to me? Don't they think I get it? If those sort of thoughts are in your mind, make sure you rein that in and realize it's a form of insecurity. Because great athletes still have a paunchy little old gray-haired coach that is telling them what to do.
Yep.
Like they're going, get your arm up. Get your arm back up. You're dropping your shoulder too much, or you got to come through the ball when you're swinging, as a baseball player. So don't let yourself ever get to the point to where your mind is saying those kind of things, because it's just an insecurity. Like great people that are secure in themselves, they can hear things, and if it applies and they realize it applies, great. If they think somebody else think they need it, great. They just take it in like a sponge.
How, Pastor Kevin, when you are coaching people, what are some of the things, even for you, that you would say, whether it was myself or hundreds and hundreds of people that you've coached, what are some of the things that could stand out to someone, to you, even like as a pro and a con with coaching? Like, are you able to tell pretty quickly, like they're not coachable, or they are coachable?
No, I think you can tell pretty quick. And sometimes you hope that they become coachable in a process of their own getting secure or being comfortable. If not, you realize they're probably going to be stuck where they are on our team. And potentially over time, if they don't adjust to that and get comfortable in that dynamic of conversations, there's a lid that goes on them. So I like them to ask questions. If they do understand, I love it if they repeat what I said.
Yeah, that's good.
And so they say back to me, okay, so what I hear you saying, Pastor, is ... Do I have that right? Like, so those are engage me in a way that makes me see that you are a learner, that you want to make sure you're getting all the nuance. And then of course, what I like to see is I like to see people take what I said and apply it.
Well,
and sometimes that is it. I hear it back through the grapevine. I'll pull somebody aside. I'll say something to them on the team. I'll give them a little input, and no one else really knows it that I did that. But then maybe a month or two down the road, somebody on the team, another leader might go, you know what? They changed their attitude. That certain person, they're different lately, or they're more hungry, or whatever it was. And that's when you just feel like, man, that's a coachable person.
That's great.
And I think what you said, too, is a great coaching point, asking someone to repeat back, what do you hear me saying?
Yeah.
I was in my own meeting with a counselor recently, and I said the comment, I said, I know what you're saying about X. And she actually stopped me. She goes, what do you hear me saying? and she made me repeat it, I actually thought it was really helpful and clarifying, which I think speaking up for team members, I think we need to be held to the point of being clear.
That's great.
And not assuming.
Pastor Kevin, let me ask you this. Not long ago, I actually connected with a player who'd been in the Pittsburgh Pirates organization, and his children are now on Team USA. And high up, they'll play around the world baseball. It's high level baseball. Yeah. And he and I were eating just a few weeks ago, And I had to get my phone out and start taking notes. He was just saying some great stuff. But one of the things he was telling me with these programs that get all the way to Team USA is parents and people in authority have to sign off that they will not go to the dugout. They will not call out directions to the kids playing.
Yeah.
That you sign off that child's going to be coachable at that level.
Gosh.
You can't be going over to the dugouts. You can't be giving input. You can't be influencing. Have you found, even in our world, ministry, life, church, teams, that sometimes if we're not careful when you're trying to coach someone, like, I'm not looking for all of these voices, whether it's friends or family or whoever, like, I don't know if he's right, and I don't know if he should be telling you that, and I don't know.
That's a great point.
Like, do you find it's really important to, not that we're signing off on waivers, but like,
Absolutely.
let me coach them?
And I've had it happen repeatedly over the years, is that, again, people will, what I say don't make sense, or to them, or what I say maybe offends them a little bit, or what I say they want to stand up for what they think versus what I said. And so when that happens, they'll meander over to their little affirmation corner.
Yep.
And they'll get affirmation, and they're getting affirmation, and somebody's propping up their way and how they think and how they feel. Again, what does that do? It's like, go work for your affirmation. You can't work for me. So you have to remember that you're here to serve your coach. And that's a great example. I love hearing that example you gave, because that makes so much sense to me. And to say parents can't no longer coach.
You sign off.
You sign off. You sign
Brilliant.
a contract. That's
And it was
brilliant.
so amazing to me because the dad played for the Pittsburgh Pirates organization.
Wow.
So it's not like he doesn't know what he's talking
Right.
about.
Wow.
College ball, played professionally, and you got to sign the waiver.
Wow.
Sit over here. Let me coach him.
I'll tell you what I did. Jody, my daughter, played college basketball, and I was able to coach her up through the latter years of high school pretty well. Like, in other words, she had coaches, and when she did end up with a coach finally that she really liked in high school, he attended our church, and he was a great guy, and he and I thought a lot alike, so it was really smooth. But it was during that time that I started saying to her, you know what, ask Coach Jerry. Yeah. You know what, talk to Coach Jerry about that. And I started pushing her toward her coaches.
Towards coaching.
And when she did get recruited and got her scholarship in college, there was a definite, I told her, I told my wife, I told everyone, I'm now dad. And what dad does is dad supports the coach. Dad just shifts in gear and says, what did your coach tell you?
Yeah.
And then when she tells me what the coach said, this is a winning coach. This is a coach that wasn't just young, uneducated. This is a coach she had a long pedigree of wins and victories at the college level. So I would remind Jody, she knows what she's talking about, Jody. She knows what she's doing. It may not feel right to you, but just lean into that. She is there to make you the best you can be. So
you have several team player principles here listed, and I'm doing a terrible job getting you through all of these. So we could go on any number, but I think before we move on, I'd like to have you talk about knowing your role. Yeah. I think every team player knows their role.
Yeah, so I've often said over the years that, and I think you alluded to it when we started the podcast today, of your talent, your gifting doesn't always initially line up maybe to where you serve on a team. And I've often said over the years, the miracles of Jesus, the ministry of Jesus launched with guys who we don't even know their names. Servants' names are never mentioned. The mother of Jesus looks at them and says, whatever he tells you to do, do it. And then verse 9, 10, 11 says, this beginning of miracles. So it's all birthed out of guys who are willing to do whatever. And if we're not careful in this generation, we lose that principle. We don't have people who are willing to do whatever. And I think it's a principle of a team player. You're willing to do whatever. And so sometimes people say, I can't find a job. Well, then when you talk to them for a few minutes, you realize the only reason they don't have a job is they're not willing to do whatever. Wow. And some people could say, my marriage isn't working. And then when you talk to them about, are you counseling? And they're like, well, I don't want to do the counseling and I don't want to read it. Well, you're not willing to do whatever. And so this principle of whatever can filter its way even into our teams at church. And it's like, I'm not willing to do whatever. I just lead worship, or and I think the principle of Christ is willing to do whatever he says to you, do it. And water to wine. I think that the same is true in teams. I was reminded, and there's a lot of thoughts I have come to mind, Brandon, but I was reminded of when I had heard about Keith Booth, University of Maryland. He was a first-round draft pick in 1997 of the Chicago Bulls. He was the 28th overall pick. He was 6'6", defensive-minded player. No one expected him to be a first-round pick. He was brought in for his defense. So when you read the whole story, Pastor Kevin, they actually said that the media, there was an outcry. Why did you waste a first-round pick on Keith Booth? He's not even a first-round pick. Wow. He doesn't really score. He plays defense. And management told the media the reason we picked him was for practice. That's what they told the media. We didn't pick him for the games. We picked him to play defense against Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. So some of the numbers in his rookie season, Keith Booth played only 2.8 minutes in 6 games that season. Oh, my gosh. But Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen both, they say their game elevated to a whole nother level because of the defense Keith Booth was playing against them in practice. And that's the only reason they drafted him, was for practice. Well, I think when we take that principle and we apply it to church and teams and ministry, and we say, know your role, I think the enemy sometimes can get in our minds, our own selfishness maybe. Yeah. Like how come I'm not on the stage, or how come the light's not on me? Or, well, if Keith Booth would have taken that same approach, he wouldn't have championship rings.
Beautiful.
But he was willing to say, I'm going to know my role. I'm going to play my part. Whatever he says, I'm going to do it, kind of a principle.
It's beautiful.
And they win championships.
That's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
So, Micah, you said something recently that I really wanted to dive into for a minute, and that's the idea of how teams unravel. You said something really profound. Great teams don't win every time, and we're all going to experience losses. Why don't you just take us into this place about great teams, and how they win versus teams that unravel?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of angles that we can look at learning from losses. Zig Ziglar, he would often say it's not a loss if you learn from it. But from a sports perspective, it's very interesting when you look at championship teams. So if you look at hockey teams, football teams, baseball teams, and you study spectacular seasons. So you look at some of them where in different sports, their record could have been 73-7, or they could have went 15-1. And I've read numerous stories where when you ask the coaches, when you ask the players, what was the key to the season, this spectacular season, what was the key to the season, they'll often say when they had a key loss. And they'll talk, I've read it in numerous sports, they'll talk about key losses, that some coaches will even say it was good we lost that game. Now, I know that's hard to hear sometimes, because we probably, don't like, I love sports. I think we don't like to lose, but it's in some of those moments where you're like, okay, what do we need to realign? What do we need to go back to the basics? What are some of the things that we have let slip?
Good.
And, sometimes it's that game tape of the losses. I think that really helps us, that if something is unraveling, if something is, coming undone, that we can shore that up and learn from the losses.
That's really good. I think it's not just true in a, like we tried a program and it didn't work, or we tried to add a service and it didn't work. It's definitely true with those sort of things. But as you're talking about it, I'm thinking about people who, when, let's just imagine there's some things that there's a group of disgruntled people, for example, in the church, and they're disgruntled about one thing and then maybe another, and they don't like stuff. The way that your team responds to that,
it's good,
is what I found over the years is very crucial in terms of your ability to keep moving forward. And I know that when you're a smaller church, A lot of times staff and lead teams are smaller. And so if you just happen to have one or two people on the team that don't respond well to somebody's criticism or a group that's not happy and just kind of leans in and reasons, well, maybe what they're saying is this and maybe they're right. And you create then a loss. You take a loss of people, a loss of support, and it just snowballs because the team didn't handle well a loss.
That's good.
And I was thinking about that when you're talking about it, is this, how you handle loss, not just in a program, but how you handle loss in terms of some of people's favor or support. How are you going to handle that? And a good team will say, you know what? Maybe we're not perfect. Maybe we should have paid more attention to something or did something a little different. But hey, we're a great team. We're a great church. We're not going to let this put us down or set us back. And they just come back for the next week. They come back for the next game. They come back with a tenacious desire as a team and as a church leadership team that we're going to be better. We're going to get stronger through this.
And I think the element of even learning from losses, Brandon, and then Pastor Kevin, when you're talking, I love that angle. There's an element of fans are fickle. That's just part of it. Years ago, I read an article about, they chronicled the career of Derek Jeter, champion. Now he's an owner, but they chronicled his career. And I remember reading, this was years back, but I remember reading some of the stuff where it said he went on a hitting streak, front page of the paper, sports sections. But then he would have a slump and the booze and, is he losing, these, and it chronicled his career of when he was basically front page versus when he ended up on the back page. And I remember years ago thinking how dangerous it is to let fickle fans determine, our emotions, our morale, our team. And I think that's important even in what we do with church and team church is, there's going to be injuries. There's going to be the DL. There's going to be readjustments.
Yep.
Some of the greatest game-changing moments is a trip to the mound. Some of the greatest game-changing moments is halftime. You go in. What are we going to do different the second half?
Yep.
And just realizing I can learn from losses.
So good.
I can learn from those moments.
That's great.
It feels like losses reveal things. Setbacks reveal.
That's good.
And PK, over the years, you've taught something to our staff here on a number of occasions I have found so helpful on undercurrents. Because I think this is actually something that needs to be revealed on our teams when there are undercurrents. Could you maybe just unpack for us for a minute how undercurrents can exist?
Yeah, and that goes right along with this whole how teams unravel, is that, let me just set it up like this. When I was a kid, I lived in the Midwest, and we used to go to the rivers. We would go swimming in rivers. And one of the things that I learned at a really young age was that there are undercurrents in the rivers, and you have to be really careful when you're swimming in a river not to get in the undertow of the river. It'll pull you down. And so the idea of undercurrents with a team is also very real, in the sense that as you're swimming in the river of team and the river of relationship and interaction, there will be things that will come along, and opportunities even for you, if you're not careful, to get caught in what I call an undercurrent. So it can be something like an unspoken expectation. It's invisible, but it's real.
That's good.
Like, and if you allow yourself to have an expectation as a member of a team, like, well, if I do this and do this and do this, then I'm going to get the next solo on the worship team, because I show up on time and I'm here and they know I can sing. It won't be long. I'll be a star. Well, you now have an expectation. You've now created an unspoken expectation which is another current, is just a hidden agenda. Like, you have a hidden agenda. You now have this unspoken expectation. And so it's just stuff that goes on that is invisible underneath the surface in our life, and we're the only ones who can avoid it. Like, it's up to us to stay out of the undercurrent, to watch out for it, to recognize where those undercurrents exist and to stay away from it. It's just crazy how easy it is. And I want to say this with understanding today, and yet I just think if you've been on a team very long, you're responsible for staying out of the undercurrent. Like
That's great.
You cannot let yourself get caught up with indifference of any kind, for example, toward your leaders, your pastors, your teammates, because again, when you do, this is how teams unravel. You're not just doing yourself an injustice,
so good, Pastor
you're doing
Kevin.
your team an injustice.
It's so good. So, Pastor Kevin, when I'm hearing you talk about undercurrents, I'm reminded just through the lens of sports that sometimes people will say, okay, what is best for the team right now? What's best for the team? And I've watched coaches bring in backups. They're looking for a spark. They're looking for something to ignite. And so it's not always what the person's thinking. Like, in your reference, I want the solo, or I want to speak, or I want to be a star. And all of a sudden now that coach, that leader, that pastor is shifting things up, maybe switching some things around. And I'm always intrigued watching in those moments of life, in those seasons of life, how teams respond.
Yep.
And sometimes you look over and that quarterback that maybe has been switched out, or that player that they're bringing in, the sixth man to spell him for a moment, the camera can scan over to the bench, and really it's one of two things that can happen. I often look at these towels, and this is part of what I had been thinking about, just the use of a towel, that you can either look over and see that player that has a towel over their head. Body language screams. It's not just silent. It screams.
Right.
They've got a towel over their head. They've got their arms folded. Their legs are they're on the end of the bench. They're pouting. Or we can choose to get the towel and we're rallying, cheering on that sixth man, cheering on that backup quarterback, because I'm not just a player, right? I'm a team.
Yeah.
I'm a team player. But when you're talking about undercurrents and you're talking about some of those things that maybe can pull us down, when something is not going the way you hoped, or when you're not that star shining as you referenced, what are some of the things that you think we all need to be guarded about, careful about when it comes to undercurrents? And how can we be the person who is waving the rally towel and not the person pouting on the end of the bench with the towel over our head?
There's one answer, and that is self-awareness. And self-awareness is one of the greatest gifts that or greatest skills, maybe would be a better way to say it. The greatest skills that a team player can develop is self-awareness. Like, because what if somebody has to talk to you about it, even if you respond well in that moment, there was a blind spot for you. So the longer, the more you can get to the point to where those moments come, you got pulled out of the game. Let me just say this. Yesterday, my wife and I were talking about a situation, and I just looked at her and said, you know what, I'm going to choose to not believe the worst on that. I'm going to, and I don't always do that. I'm not trying to be saintly here. But in the moment, I'm like, I want you to understand that you could be right. But I'm going to choose to believe better than that until they prove me wrong. And I just think that when a person, if you can do that, like if you can say, you know what, my coach is coaching the team. My coach is making the call. My coach pulled me out, set me on the bench or whatever. Now, the right thing for me to do is to grab my towel and to start moving it, not go put it on my head. If I put it on my head, I'm pouting. That doesn't help my team. If I put it on my head, people see I'm pouting. It's like, that's not what a coach wants. That's not what a coach needs. And so self-awareness to say, even though I have to press through that feeling I have right now, and you know what, maybe I need to be more aware, reactive, that I'm not being treated fairly, I'm going to, in this moment, I'm going to go higher. I'm going to get bigger. I'm going to be bigger. And so I think that I would just say to anyone who's dealing with, we all deal with it, when you're dealing with an instinct or an impulse to react, and a coach doing this, and I don't know why they did that, and I don't know why my pastor made that choice, said that, or my team leader did that, said that. When you feel that way, if you can go, wait, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that gal. I want to be able to absorb those moments of disappointment really, really well. Yeah. But it takes self-awareness.
And it seems like it's so noticeable when you were talking about the towel over your head, into the bench pouting. It's so noticeable to everyone else that when they are used to the healthy you, and all of a sudden they begin to see the unhealthy one, and you're almost like shrinking back into the shadows. You're not as engaged. And everyone, you may not have the towel over your head physically, but everyone notices like something's off, something's not right. And I love something, Brandon, I've heard you talk about this, Pastor Kevin, I've heard you teach this, that I don't have to agree with everything to be aligned.
That's right.
And so when the coach, when that team leader, when a pastor makes decisions, I don't have to agree with everything to wave my towel.
Right.
I don't just wave my towel because I'm in agreement.
Yeah.
I wave my towel because I'm in alignment.
I'm in alignment. I'm with my team. I want to cheer on my team.
That's so good. That's so good.
Let's wrap up on this thought today. Because we're in a unique season right now where teams are experiencing headwinds. I think that's a picture I'm really grabbing onto right now. We're going to make progress, but wins are going to look different right now. The wins are not at our back. They're often right now, it feels like they're at our front, and it's sustained. We're in a season of sustained headwinds, it feels like right now. How can a team keep from unraveling in this season, the slow unravel, and really look for the wins, even if the wins look different right now? Like, how do we find a win in this moment that we're leading in?
Well, I would just say two things, and that is come close and strengthen or fortify your commitment. There's a military alignment that's called flanks. And it comes, I think, out of Greek military, but it was adopted then by Roman military and others in ancient warfare. And if you ever see a picture of it, I think it's spelled PHLANX. I've taught on it before, but if you ever see a picture of it, it's basically they come together shoulder to shoulder, and they form a triangle.
So good.
Facing out. And it's just weird because they have to practice how to move together while staying close. Like, they've got to be so close that there's no gap. They're next to each other. And yet sometimes that means some of the triangle is walking backwards. Some of them are walking sideways when others are walking forward. But they're moving like this. And it's a weird, but it was proven to be like so powerful and effective in battle once you get it, that in times of adversity, if you were in that military alignment, chances are you were going to win against bigger armies and maybe more skilled military because of the flow you were in, or and I think coming close and then fortify your commitment. Like, just realize we go together. Wherever we go together. We go with more courage and more strength. So I would just say in this season that we're in, that would be my answer. I don't know. You go ahead, Micah.
No, I think just a couple of thoughts, and I love that, and I was thinking about this just this morning, how often that they will say in sporting events, the team that takes or makes the least amount of penalties wins the game. And sometimes if we're not careful, we're thinking the team that makes the most plays wins the game. And often they'll tell us it's not just about making plays. Sometimes it's about taking the least amount of penalties. And so I think even in this season, how important it is that, yes, we want to make plays, but we also don't want to take a bunch of penalties. And so when we're talking about teams that are unraveling, don't be that team player that's getting sidetracked by what's going on globally or nationally or drug into the undercurrents. Don't be the one that's on the end of the bench pouting, towel over your head. So yes, we want to make plays, but I also want to be someone that doesn't take a bunch of penalties. Don't be the one dragging the team down. Don't be the one sidetracking what's happening. And I was reminded, I called my wife in the room. I was watching one day. I follow several different things online of successful coaches, or several different things I'll follow and read. And Nick Saban, a college football coach, had said that every one of us are defined by 2 words in life. And I just wanted to share this, Brandon, that the words were and or but. Every single one of us, we will be defined by either one of these words, and or but. And I just want to I want to quote Coach Saban. He said that usually when teams reach out to him about players for the draft, he said it will go something like this. I had to replay it several times to quote him. He said, usually I'm going to start by saying they're talented, they have ball skills, quick feet, change of direction, tackle well, they're tough, they play good man-to-man, they're fast. And then he said, here's going to be the 2 words, and or but. He said, I'm going to say those things. He said, and then it's going to sound something like this. And they're a good leader. I love them in the locker room. They graduated. Coaches loved him. Or here's the second word, but they got in a fight in a bar, domestic violence, positive drug test. And I had to replay it several times when he was saying your life is defined or determined by 2 words, and or but. Because when you think about team church, team players, when you think about even ministry, think about this. If we went through those giftings and talents, and he or she is committed, they're gracious, they're kind, they're forgiving, they're unified, they're dependable, they're aligned, but, right, here's the second one, he or she argues, they're dramatic, they push back, they're moody, they get caught in the undercurrent, right? And so even today as we're talking about teams, how important it is that I want to be, I think we all want to be the person that is gifted, talented, they can sing, they can communicate, they're creative, and they're good, and not fall into the but. And so I just want to encourage teams. I know, Pastor Kevin, we've talked about this in this season with everything going on. Let's not be the team player that's pouting, towel over our head. Let's get that same towel. Let's be rallying. Our churches, we are making a comeback, whether it's locations, campuses, services, students, kids ministry. This is not the time to be pouting. This is the time to rally our teams, and he's going to build his church.
Amen.
And the gates of hell will not prevail against it.
So good.
And I'm going to be someone that adds to the team. I'm going to make plays, and I'm not going to have a bunch of penalties. I want to be part of the I want to be part of the comeback of the church.
So good.
Well, hey, I'm sure you could agree that today's conversation was really important and timely. I pray that it helped you in some way. However you're watching this today or listening to this today, why don't you hit the subscribe button? It's our heart to bring a conversation to you just like this every first Tuesday of the month. So we'll be back next month with another great conversation for you and your team. Until then, Team Church, we love you. We're running strong with you. God bless you guys. Lead strong in this season.